Okay, everyone, welcome back from the hopefully refreshing and good break. After a whirlwind of inputs and exchanges and things and drinks and foods and everything, you see with regard to the time that we tried to push to avoid starting the final session, to make it a bit longer, to stay longer in this context. But I think we need to do that because we also have a tight schedule for the plenary session in the end. Yeah, welcome back again. And from our side, we want to guide you a bit to the next 2 hours, to the final 2 hours of this first meeting, with a bit of exchange between inputs and lots of inputs from you, because I guess some of you might be a bit tired. So we want to have this, again, a bit interactive. Good. Without much further ado, I think the first thing on our agenda here now is to wrap it a bit up, like that in a way how we started, having a brief round of reflections, impressions from the four conveners, starting with Ingrid, in case François and Patrick. I just leave the floor to you in quite an informal way.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, I heard last time you couldn't hear me very well here with this one, so I'm using now the mic. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So just some final reflections on my part. I really very much enjoyed seeing a lot of people again, but also got to know a lot of new people. So I think this event was really great in that context. Does it go well with the mic? Yeah. Okay. Hear myself double in a way. So on content. What I found very useful, we had a discussion in the workshop on the geopolitics of climate mobilities and relocation. And we're thinking there it might be nice also to have a particular set of substreams, like more thematic focus areas within the network. We were thinking in that workshop, maybe planetary politics would be a better term for us than geopolitics. So we're gonna, with a subgroup, also further develop that. So if you still wanna also connect with that, also feel free to reach out. But I saw similar discussions going on in other sessions. For instance, in the immobilities sessions, there was also quite a big group with people like Bishavit and Caroline, Moishatri, if I say your name correctly, or Sengupta was your last name, and several others, who also, and Emily saying, oh, maybe we should do something on immobilities. So, and I think there are more such themes and ideas that came up. So that I found very interesting, and also look forward to seeing how that further develops. I think I stick to this, if that's right. Yeah. Okay.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. Yes, a few words from me also. First of all, I think from what the conversations I had with everybody, I think there's a general impression that, yeah, we are super happy with the last few days. There have been so many old connections reestablished, new connections made, and we're also really impressed by the kind of the diversity and quality of the work that you all presented. So please give yourself a little applause here. Last week, one of my team members introduced me to an acronym that I didn't know yet, FOMO. Are you familiar with that? I had this fear of missing out with these 4 parallel sessions, with these super contributions. I missed almost everything. So yeah, I definitely missed out a lot, but I think we can see some of it back, right? So yeah, that's something to do. So maybe one thing I would say, like on more on the content side, one thing that really struck me, that our field of research has really matured and evolved. So when I started working on this topic, it was more like, is environmental change a driver of migration? And then maybe under what circumstances? But if I look at the diversity of topics, like different types of mobility, of course, but then also now how gender intersects with that, with how conflict intersects with that. So it's just a sign that we are, really like getting to a stage where some of the old questions are more or less answered, and then more specific questions arise that now receive our attention. So that's really good, I think. I would like to just highlight one personal highlight of this week. So that's something that we have been working for 2 years on an e-learning course on human mobility in the context of climate change. And this was very exciting for me to, for the first time, present the course to fellow researchers. And I was nervous. Will they like it? Is it too much like this or too much like that? But I really, we had a small group in the workshop yesterday, with all lecturers who teach on human mobility in the context of climate change or environmental change. And I really left the workshop with the impression that, yes, I think a lot of maybe people here, and please contact me if you'd be interested, who would actually gonna take up this e-learning course and combine it with their personal teaching on this topic, the classroom teaching. So I'm super excited about it. Do get in touch with me if you want to hear more. And yeah, safe travels back. And thanks so much.
Well, thank you very much. I will certainly echo the words of my colleagues. And yes, I concur that I think our research field has evolved and matured a lot. And I think this was obvious for everyone, judging the quality of the papers that were presented these days. I think obviously, conceptually, the research field has evolved. Also, empirically, with the quality of the data that are produced, I think that probably our next frontier from a scientific viewpoint would be the renewal of some of the research methods, the introduction of machine learning methods and these kind of things, and how we will be able to combine these quantitative methods with more traditional qualitative methods. I think this is also perhaps one of the key scientific challenges for the months and the years ahead. I am also struck, looking at the diversity of the group, to see that different research teams, research groups have emerged in different universities and institutes across Europe. And I think this is also something that is very significant. I mean, when we had these conferences a few years ago, with the exception of a few research teams, it was mostly isolated researchers researching what was still perceived as a niche topic. Today, clearly, in many universities, there are research teams, research groups that are organized around these topics. And I think this is extremely important. But at the same time, there are also researchers working on their own in their institutions or university, which I guess makes the rationale for our research network even more important, so that we are better connected. A challenge is also, of course, the geographic coverage. I think clearly one of the forte of this conference was the presence of our African colleagues, and too often we have these conferences without colleagues from the Global South, and I think it was extremely important for them to be there and to be fully part of the network, and we should certainly continue in that way. At the same time, I'm a little bit afraid that we are losing slowly the connection with our North American colleagues. It is, I don't know if it is also your case, but I have clearly less contacts and less interactions than before with our American and Canadian colleagues. And I think that this is perhaps something that an obstacle that will need to be overcome in the coming years. And clearly the COVID years and the Trump years have induced a huge toll on this. But I think this is also an important aspect not to lose, that we shouldn't lose sight of. Finally, I think we need to recognize also the importance of these large conferences. Of course, they have a cost for the organizers, they have a cost for the participants, they have also a cost in terms of carbon footprint, and we need to recognize that. But at the same time, I feel that they are also so important for the way we will interact with each other and for the way we will evolve as a scientific community, and I think for the progress and the advancements of science and of knowledge. And I think we owe a massive thank you to the organizers, and in particular the local organizers in Vienna, Patrick, Harald, Marion, and Simon and all of the team. I think that we owe you a massive thank you. The next year conference, as you know, will be in Liège. We know that the bar is crazy high, so we'll do our very best to provide a conference with hopefully the same level of knowledge, interactions, and dare I say, enjoyment as well, which is so important in these conferences. So massive thank you.
That's always very difficult to speak up after François, I guess. Yeah, I hope you all enjoyed the conference. I enjoyed very much all the exchange. One thing that I learned for sure during this conference is how to fix Zoom meetings. I think that is a competence that I have now. I think I will repeat what the others have said already. Personally, I followed kind of the migration adaptation kind of sessions that were here. There were multiple of them. And here we could also see that the field has matured. We have a very nuanced understanding of migration adaptation. And I think we are on good track here when it comes to migration adaptation to understand under which circumstances migration can work for whom. To consider the different dimensions, the social speciality, and so on and so forth. I think we need to understand and address, and this was one of the comments during one of the sessions that we had, in how far actually we want to intervene and who is intervening and intervening in what way to support migration adaptation. What is very common when it comes to agriculture, I think Zoom, you said that, it's not so common when it comes to migration. And I think that was one of the things that I took with me. Conceptually, I thought kind of temporality popped up in kind of different sessions. I think the necessity to look into historical perspectives, to look at cumulative effects, for example, of climate change, also migration, when we are evaluating the success of migration adaptation, for example, was important, but also the question of future imaginaries, future making, and understanding climate mobilities as a way of how people actually making, molding their future was something that I took with me. And lastly, the last point is, and that was very prevalent in the last session that I participated, one was, okay, there's more research needed, and we as researchers always want to hear that. We have seen a map that even though so much research has been done in the past, there are still blind spots on the global map when it comes to empirical research in certain regions, in certain countries. I think that is very much needed. So it's an encouragement for us to do also more research and to encourage more people to do research. The second thing that was also very clear in this last session that I participated is that we need kind of more interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary research. Many of the papers that were presented were actually interdisciplinary projects that has been conducted, acknowledging the fact that each of us have kind of a limited scope of understanding, and we need kind of the expertise of others. And if we work together, we will be better able to understand all these complexities. And lastly, kind of the science policy interface. I think that is very important because we are doing research that should be kind of societal relevant. It's relevant, and we should seek out and reach out to other actors. We had a couple of papers looking at the obstacles for action and the science policy interface, how we can be more impactful as a scientific community as well. I think this is a big encouragement for us to have this network and to develop this network further and to increase our impact for the society in a good way. And with that, I hand over to Harald.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think what would be nice now to have a little bit your impressions. You know this already, our good old Menti. So you just, I think that should be large enough to be scanned even from the last row. And you can, the participants in the Zoom group room will have the link in the chat. Now, does everyone have the link? Does it work? Good. Then I will try to switch our screen to have a look what happens here, because the question here is like, what did you see as the most salient, important, pressing highlights, questions, themes, red threads, whatever that emerged in the conference? Things that were for you, the things that were the most noticeable. This time I learned a bit. I didn't put this in the form of this Wordle because that would be very likely also like micro words again. This needs to be scrolled through a bit to have a view. This would be. Oh, it's not. Oh, it's not shared in Zoom. Yeah, I will share the screen, the overall screen. Then now that should be visible also in Zoom. So as we don't have lots of time, I think what we cannot do now is like go through all of this and analyze this in a proper way. But I think we can just like scroll it a bit through and get some impressions of key terms and key things that are in here. And what we will do after this, like send all of you or make this accessible in that form. And as I said, Menti has the nice feature that you can get all the detailed results in tabular form. So we can go through this, analyze this, have a look at that. What are key things here? Which ones are the most important, most pressing perspectives and ideas here? So I can see lots of very, very diverse things here. Drivers, shocks, planetary politics, that is again. So that, for me, that also mirrors again what was said a number of times, the maturity probably of the research field in a full diversity of perspectives on lots of different scales and dimensions. And I think as we have this was the starting point of this network. So I guess what would be probably worthwhile looking at key questions or topics of things that emerge. One thing that comes to my mind from one of the sessions I was attending, how to distinguish environmental and non-environmental drivers in quantitative analysis. Key question. Is it a lack of data? Is it the methodologies methods that we use that are not sufficient? Do we need other methods that already exist? Nice. Do we need other methods that are not fully developed yet? We need people who can further develop methods, statisticians, mathematicians. Or do we come to boundaries here where even the methods do not allow us? Is this more ontological than an epistemological problem? These kind of things, I guess that would be something that this network could do, like grab some key questions like this and then try to work out solutions for challenges that we need to overcome. It's better like that. Okay. So still growing here. I think we won't get a final thing here. It's like we'll give this a couple of minutes then, and then we maybe can move on for having something like a little evaluation of the last days. Because what we also want to know, of course, we had this idea in the first day. You can remember what do you intend, or what is important for you in this network conference. Now we want to look back a bit, like what did you do this network meeting? So I will now switch to the next slide. If there's the urgent need to add things later, we can also go back. So this is a pretty straightforward thing. There are 8 questions or 8 statements here. How was the meeting going for me? I did make new contacts, not at all or totally. I did meet old friends and colleagues. I got advice for career development. I had exchange on themes and topics. I have a slight hangover from yesterday. I got new ideas and inspirations, and I am part of a joint activity that emerged from that meeting, a proposal, a paper, whatever. And I'm already an established scholar or stakeholder in the field, not at all or totally. Oh, it's hanging. Do others also have the same problem? It doesn't work for you? Just on that side of the room. Interesting. That's the Western Wi-Fi issue. So let's have a little look on what we can see here. So made new contacts. That happened obviously in many cases. I did meet old friends and colleagues with this U-shaped curve. I would assume that shows like there's lots of people in here that know each other for a long time, and also lots of people who are quite new, the young generation, as this was put already. I got advice for career development. That would have been really nice if it's more on the totally side. Probably something that we need to think about, how we can push this on these kind of meetings, structure this a bit more. I'd exchange on themes and topics. That's very nice to see that happened. I have a slight hangover from yesterday. I would say I know probably some people who might have a slight hangover from yesterday, including me. But it's good that it's not on the right side, totally. I've got new ideas and inspirations. That's also really great to see that was happening. I'm part of a joint activity that emerged from the meeting. Rather, not so many and not so much. Probably also something that we could think about how we can foster this and push this more. And I'm already an established scholar or stakeholder in the field, so very few established. What about all the professors and like the old generation of very, very modest statements, I would say. Why I added this here is because I think it's not visible now because it's all blurred in the average, but while going through the data afterwards, we can then see who said, I got advice for career development. Very unlikely that senior professors will state, yes, I got advice for career development. But then we can disentangle this a bit and see, like, does this really reflect that there was no real advice on career development, or were the younger scholars putting this more upfront and saying, "Let's, yeah, we did or did not." Similar from joint activity and the networking part. So I think that we will share this, of course, with everyone. So that will be an interesting idea also for us, I think, for you developing these kind of meetings, interactions, and formats maybe a bit further. Good. Das Mikro and then the microphone. Okay. It sounds so loud if I do it like that. Well. So is there anything from your side that you would like to comment or say or highlight? Any issues? Oh, today the steps are really high.
Thank you very much, Harold. My name is Sam Kojo from the University of Ghana. Mine is on, looking at the future of the network. Okay, so I see a series of conferences have been outlined maybe for the next 2 or 3 years. Picking up from where Francois stopped, well, there was quite an impressive appearance from the African scholars here. And so I would like to, on behalf of the African scholars, make a case that we are very much part of this network. And we will also, as we think of the future, we also want to host the conference in Africa. So let's all be thinking about it. I recognize also the point made about our North American colleagues and the fact that we need to indeed rope them in as well, so we can really call this a global network. So let us not make this look like it has just one regional block, but we can truly be global in nature. And the Africans want to make a strong case. We've had some meetings amongst ourselves, and we are willing to maybe host the 4th conference or whichever one becomes available. We are there. And then still on that issue, also to be thinking, I don't know the plans the conveners have, but for sustainability, there may be the need to maybe have some representatives, I don't know, regional representatives as well on the network, so we can, we can make decisions and follow up wherever we are. So those are some of the comments I want to make, as far as my coming year is concerned. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sam. That was quite an important point. Anything else? Feels a bit like a showmaster coming down the stairs here. Where's the James Last music? Good. Coming to the network, I think that's the next thing that we want to talk about here. Is it in the Zoom? Great. This looks very tight and packed, but I want to try to give it a very brief and quick overview of what happened in the workshop on the network development. We had a number of questions that we wanted to address. These are in the orange box at the top, and then our answers, or what we worked out as possible solutions that we could do. The first question was, how can the network enable a fruitful and effective exchange between different scientific or epistemic communities? And also, that's what we added, between science and policy. How to facilitate more active engagement of researchers and stakeholders from the Global South, and how can young scholars play a stronger role? So in this meeting, what we came up with were very concrete ideas and solutions for some of them. The one thing is have a web page and a mailing list. a mailing list that is used for communicating news, but especially job posts, call for papers, conference announcements, publications, whatever arises, right? Special issues, need for cooperation or collaboration, etc. I think that's something we can quickly realize it's a low-hanging fruit. We have this network and conference webpage already that can stay and that can be managed and amended. Then probably a communication forum that we can embed in the website. A little bit like you might know the Belmont Forum webpage where you can register, and then there's this super ultra vivid exchange in this fora always. Maybe something not as vivid there. We don't get offers for traditional plant healing for scientific problems or things like that. But matching supply and demand, that was our idea, where things that you probably don't want to post over the full mailing list. It's like, hey, I need an advice on method development or whatever, but you can post this in the forum and see what happens. Concrete, methodological, topic-wise, regional questions that could be or could not be answered. But that would be an idea, like just trying this out. I think it's also easy. And then there was the idea of creating a database of all the experts, like an expert roster, where the field of expertise, career level, the location, etc., would be in. So that could facilitate a lot of collaboration and exchange. So once you know who's out there, you know who to talk to. And it's also not only our internal network members who would be benefiting from that, but also the outside. One example or use cases that we thought about here could be facilitating South-South scholar connections and collaborations that are also not so common, and that will be really helpful to maintain and to establish. Creating a peer-to-peer network on the PhD or postdoc level, where you can have like quick answers and chats. People working on maybe isolated not in strong working groups, but more in single locations could exchange and get parts of an exchange network. Maybe also initiating something like a mentorship, where it's like, yeah, mentorship is lots of work, but what about a micro mentorship, like a hurdle? So I don't need a 3 years mentorship program with someone if I have a specific problem. Maybe it's just, how do I write an application for that scholarship program? Maybe this is just a 20 minutes exchange that helps me a lot. And I think that was also voiced, that especially scholars from Global South often face these huge hurdles of maybe small hurdles for huge things and making things inaccessible. So that's where there is this possible. Maybe if you have something like a network where information, expertise, and also the willingness to share knowledge on these and these specific fields would help. But then it's also possible, I guess, if this is accessible to the outside, for media, policymakers, to find like, we are looking, there was a disaster in country X, so we are looking for experts on immobility, mobility, displacement, whatever, on disasters, floods, earthquakes, whatever, in country XYZ. I think we have this happens in Austria as a small country, so people from time to time come to our working group, because we are basically the only ones in Vienna, or not the only ones, but a few, like IASA, Graz, and there are few institutions working on these topics. So people come to you. But on a global level, this could be very valuable also for regional expertise that is much more there in the Global South. Policymakers, for example, that could also help bridge a bit this divide between science and policy. Then there was the idea of a more curated, digestible email or newsletter. The question then arose also, like, who can do that? That's lots of work. That would be an add-on to the mailing list. At least the first mail that we can send on the mailing list could maybe take the form of a collection of small news items. And then everybody knows, like, yes, that's something we can share and post here. But maybe there will be someone, because it's all our network, right? Maybe there's someone saying, like, yes, I have a little bit of capacities doing something like that. I have a workflow compiling these kind of things anyway for colleagues or in my field. Yes, I could send, for example, regularly all call for papers, all call for proposals, something like that. I don't know. That would be marvelous. Good. And then there was still, this question is still there, the fruitful and effective exchange, and then the stronger integration of science and policy, which is an issue that was not so easy to find a good solution. One thing that we thought that might be helpful when talking, and we raised this issue, or you raised this issue in the opening session, how to deal with the question of convergence or unity and diversity. Is convergence and one voice a strong factor for a network, or is diversity a strong factor? We said, well, both is actually, right? One thing that we could do, it's not such a low-hanging fruit, it's a bit of effort here, but that could be something mapping the diversity of, or coherence of positions of network members on various themes and aspects, right? For example, numbers, environmental migrant numbers. How important are numbers? How do we relate to numbers? Do we criticize that we produce and use numbers? Do we use numbers? Do we produce numbers? Immobility and mobility, how to differentiate environmental and other mobility reasons, scales of mobilities, etc. So there could be all sorts of topics or interesting fields where we could try to figure out, like, how do we relate to these topics, and then make something like a moderated exercise and find out, okay, what's the different perspectives and views here. That could be, and this depends a bit on the fields, the content, something like bridging of the first steps towards bridging different communities of practice or epistemological groups here, or at least making them visible, making us aware, like, okay, there's a huge gap, and this is not easy to overcome. There is something where people converge, something where lots of interaction takes place, and these are probably fields where we all agree, where there's unequivocal positions on X, Y, Z. And that could probably help also for the visibility of the network, position ourselves. Imagine out of a couple of these exercises come out position papers of 5, 7, 8 pages. That would be helpful for shortening these things and making media statements, for example. Or, and this is an idea that Kira brought up, what about, this would be like a condensed example, what about bringing up a statement, a position statement, things that I think we would easily find a number of statements or sub-statements where we can all agree. Reduce emissions, increase freedom of choice of mobility, reduce forced displacement or avoid forced displacement, etc. pp. And put something out, for example, before the COP. That could be a great thing. And this could also help, I think, help or contribute to the visibility of the network as community and identity formation. I think there are numerous aspects that would be connected to something like that. Then there were questions we could not really, or we didn't really, I think we avoided really finding a bit a strong position. How formal or informal should this network be? How should it be institutionalized? How should the institutions of the network look like? I think my feeling was, at least in the workshop group, like that's something we do not need to fix now probably. There could be like a working group, the conveners, or anyone who's interested in how to institutionalize something like that, what makes sense or what doesn't make sense, and discuss in a few smaller meetings in the next year. And in the next network meeting, probably we can have ideas what makes sense or not. One issue that is important, obviously, funding. Alex Sherbinin highlighted that as an online participant, so like, well, on the long run, you need some funding. You cannot do something like this every year on institutional backs, or you cannot run things always on a voluntary basis. You will need a minimum funding. So that's a question that needs to be discussed probably during, in between the next meetings or in the next meetings of the network. And then still we were still not so happy of like how to create a really like a space, like a forum, mechanism for really knowledge brokering between disciplines and different approaches and epistemologies here, but also between research and policy. That's something we didn't really get to a full good idea, I guess. Yeah, and the last really important question was then, of course, once we are done here and you're traveling back, the conference gloom and glow will fade a bit, and we are back to normal life after sleeping a while and curing our hangovers or whatever. Then comes summer holidays, then comes conference September, and then is October, November, December, January, and then is the next network meeting. So what is the first thing to do now that we should not leave, that we should not lose, and who will do it? I guess these will be super important question to talk about probably now, or to find some points. Yeah, floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks, Harald. My name is Kira Finke. I just want to elaborate on this idea of a joint statement or declaration emerging from this conference. So first of all, thank you to the organizers for bringing together such a diverse group of scientists, early career, older career scientists. I think it's really amazing the diversity of the research and the quality of the research that has been put out. But we are meeting at a time where it's extremely hot. We are seeing all these impacts emerge, and we don't see the action that will limit these climate impacts. And I'm a qualitative researcher. I work also with communities, asking them interview questions that are affected by climate change. And so I personally feel a responsibility also towards the research subject, the people that I research. And I think many people feel the same, be it qualitative or quantitative researchers, that we as some of the best educated people on the globe carry a responsibility if we engage in this type of research. So as we are nearing the next COP, which will probably not deliver the results that we expect, I think we should use this weight that we have as researchers and put out a statement regarding that sort of what you have said, the things that we can agree on, but also stating that this research field has grown so significantly, and we have delivered on the Nansen agenda. We have done our part as researchers. We have delivered more evidence, and you, meaning policymakers, etc., are not acting. And I think this is a very strong message that we can do as scientists. So this would be my suggestion to you, and I would also volunteer to draft something.
Thanks a lot. That's a strong word. I think if we deliver this a bit before COP, right? Definitely before COP, that could be a good right timing in the message. So there's a couple of months. So and I think if you get in contact and get emails of people, I don't know how the best procedure is to do that, but I think the way of doing that, it doesn't sound super complicated. And I guess with a little bit of thinking and input, we will find good important points that we can all agree and sign something. So I would be really happy if that happens. I just checked whether we could also hand in the application for a side event, but I think the deadline has passed 3 days ago for the COP. No? Ah.
Yeah, at COP28 there will be the Climate Mobility Pavilion, and the deadline will be in September or so. So there's time enough to submit something there.
Yes, cool. So that sounds like a very concrete thing to do.
If we make a statement, we could also present it there, no, at such a pavilion. So I think that would be an ideal thing to kind of launch this. And coincidentally, 30 years ago here in Vienna, there was a human rights agenda, also the Vienna Declaration on Human Rights released, that stresses this element of self-determination and self-determination of people. And so I think we can also make maybe reference to this document, because it's 30 years ago. Back then, climate change was known, but was not so much on the political agenda. And we can make this point that the environmental issues that we are facing are undermining these rights that states had agreed upon to strengthen here in Vienna 30 years ago. So I think there's a lot of things we can connect to make a very strong statement and then bring it to the COP.
Yeah, that sounds absolutely great. I consider this now as a plan, as a concrete plan with actions.
Yes, thank you, Harald. Just simply to reiterate things that were said, in particular during the workshop François led yesterday. I think it's important also to consider, I reiterate them for those who were not present, to reiterate that the objective is not necessarily ultimately to speak to policymakers. Policymakers are part of the equation, but they are just one element, one piece. They are influenced by economic interests, and they are also driven by opinions. And I think as researchers, it's so important to play a strong role in terms of education, in terms of how we define evidence, in terms of how we shift from sometimes very positivist models, paradigms, to more qualitative ones and human-centered ones. And to conclude on that, and I think it was something that was mentioned several times during these 3 days, and for me it's relatively new because it's not something I heard a lot on conferences, in particular on migration. You need to speak to people who are not necessarily like-minded people. So if I have to, there is no choice to make, but my priority clearly is that one, not policymakers. I have no expectations. It's them.
Yeah, thanks. Does that work? Yeah. No. Hello? Ah. Yeah, any other? I saw some more hands. Oh, yeah.
First of all, thank you very much for having us here. I really enjoyed the conference and beautiful cafes in Vienna. So what I missed in this conference, if, we can have cherry on the cake, like some practical workshops on methodology, like for early careers or like qualitative and quantitative, maybe from the next conferences or in between conferences, if we can ask some experts from our network to deliver it online, that would be really helpful to, to start from the bottom, like where we like how we can meaningfully find out the statistics or even the qualitative studies. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. That's an important idea. I guess that's very well possible. I mean, we had this at least one very concrete methodological workshop here. I think that was as a starter meeting, we collected ideas like who can do what quickly and came up with this. I think in upcoming events, I think we can easily strengthen that part.
Thanks. I'm Pierre from from University of Liège. First of all, again, I would like to congratulate the organizing team because it was perfect from A to Z, except the heat. I agree with our friends. But anyway, but there is something that for me has been surprising. I'm a bit old school since I'm over 50. But for me, having to develop an idea in 7 minutes was extremely frustrating, both for me as a speaker, but also as a participant. The teams that are developed are extremely complex and require depth and nuance. And the treat-alike format forbids us to think. And maybe it underlines that we are in the great acceleration. That is a characteristic of the Anthropocene. So that we are in the movement. And when I started my career, we had 30 minutes to present something. Now it turned to 20, then 15, then 10, then 7, and so what? Soon we'll just have time to give the give the introduction and the conclusion over. And I think maybe we should give some more time and depth to that, and probably talking about the works, the workshop session 4, and what could we maybe expect more about this network is maybe to have a scientific journal specific to this topic, to the topic of the network, which would allow also young researchers from here and abroad to write stuff, and we could help them this way to also have a trace of what has been done, for example, these last 3 days, because many things have been extremely interesting, but where can we read them? I mean, that's a problem. But I know also that creating and supporting such a scientific journal is just, it's a life.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, well, I think we had lots of discussions and struggles about the length of presentations. Once we got the, I don't know, 115 or so abstracts, it was like, oh my God, it will never fit in 2 days. And then we also wanted to have this network exchange, so that was the reason why in the end it was so condensed. But I'm totally with you. It was very condensed, and I can just like, in my impression, it was quite difficult for me to follow, jumping back and out and doing organizational work. I had a hard time following the density of stuff.
Just also to just respond to that thought, because I had also similar sort of. On the one hand, I really liked this inclusive setup, right? And therefore, the consequence, it's short presentations, etc. On the other hand, we were also reflecting with some, when we had some smaller scale workshops and constantly in the same room, which also had sort of benefits in going in more depth on a particular theme. So I was also just thinking, also in line with what you were saying with these, that is also, we have to see a little bit on how the format could work, but that you can have also multiple type of events, sometimes maybe indeed online for a particular workshop, and maybe also the different conferences could have also particular thematic focuses. I don't know, but I think there's also still plural ways to think about this, on how to organize this so that we can connect both to the inclusivity and to the depth of the ideas.
Okay.
Thank you. Also, I would first like to thank the organizers for putting together such an amazing event and for bringing us all together. So as a researchers and scientific community, at the end of the day, we all want our work to reach the intended community or the society, the general public, civil society. And most scientific works are not easily understandable by those people. So maybe as a short-term or long-term plan, we could have some on the platform, we could have a side where we would, when we publish our papers, we will also attach a brief translation of our research in a language that's understandable to the general public. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. There were a number of, I see Andrew there who was raising his hand all the time. There probably Patrick and you.
Thank you so much. So hopefully linked to some of the earlier points raised about having our work be relevant and having it speak to people who need it. I feel like we always struggle with knowing exactly what the demand is for, what are, like, not necessarily just policymakers, but NGOs and private sector and other groups that have some demand for evidence that they can use in some way to maybe make some decision or resolve some uncertainty. But I think we often don't know what that information or what that evidence demand is, or how it is that it can be shaping a decision, and what is the possibility space for new evidence to then change something on the ground, which leads us to feel like nobody's acting, nobody's listening, when really we're sort of stuck in a world where we are entirely supply driven. We're generating stuff that we're doing because that was our niche and that was what we found and that was what we had funding for. and we don't necessarily know how to bring it out to people. And it's not just us. I mean, this is a general research challenge of how do we match supply with demand? And it strikes me that there's enough breadth across this network that we can find a way to rope in the demanders of evidence and find a better portal to, again, identifying who's demanding what and in what ways do we believe it can shape decisions so that we know how to interpret what happens and what comes out of it as a success or failure. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I think that's a strong call for real inclusion of non-scientific stakeholders and co-design basically from the beginning of projects and scientific work. I think that would be a very strong part. I think there's a growing sense of the necessity, but it's still on our side to really make this happen.
Okay, like that. So first of all, applause for the organizers. Thank you. I learned very much. I'm Michael from the Vienna Institute for International Dialogue and Cooperation. I'm not a researcher. I have listened to you. It was very interesting for me, and I highly support the idea to present a paper, a policy paper. I don't know, a statement before COP28. I'm also leading a working group on migration and development in our umbrella organizations of development and humanitarian organizations in Austria, the Global Responsibility. And what we lack, or what is lacking, is easy, accessible, evidence-based information, what's going on the ground when it comes to displacement, immobility. So we also drafting our policy papers then before COP28. So we can then, using your points, to highlight what we think are important. We are working together, of course, with Global 2000 and Greenpeace and all this climate action NGOs in Austria. And then we bring up the results, of course, to the European and then global level, because on COP28, of course, we present or we should, or we try our best to present the positions, the positions who are developed globally by the NGO world. And therefore, it's a good idea that you draft a result paper. It's maybe also a good idea for the next time to invite or to think about one panel to discuss your points with those who are working in the field. Because, you know, we have now new funds available, also on European, but also on international level, to support projects, not directly on mobility or immobility, but on supporting countries in the global south to overcome climate crisis. And I think it's now the time to support also the officials, the governments to do the right thing. It's not only that they're not willing to do something. The question is also what they're doing. And here we need, and they need your knowledge. And I totally agree. It's not directly speaking to the politicians, but it's worth speaking directly to the officials working in the ministries in our country, but also on the European and global levels. Thank you.
That sounds like an actionable path forward.
Yeah, I just want to follow up what Hervé was saying before, right? And influencing kind of public opinion in a way. And I think we at the universities, and many of us are working at universities, are ideally positioned to do so through our teaching. Actually, I want to highlight this. Kees was mentioning also the online course, right? And we are here in Vienna also having kind of a specialization on climate mobilities, if you want, where we teach this. And I think this is happening also in other places. And this network could be also be used to facilitate kind of our experience in teaching on climate mobilities, to learn from each other and to develop our curriculum to make it better for our students. And I think this is kind of a long-term impact that could be there, but we could use this network to do so. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. David Diondrac from the UN University. I think building off the last few contributions, one of the concrete ways in which we could organize that, I think it's coming through that we, all have different profiles and different interests, and also preferred audiences. And maybe one of the simplest ways in which this kind of network can reach all this diversity of audiences is just to broadcast that we're available for that, and then have people come to us. That could be like an objective, and then in its simplest form, it could just simply be an address book where we make clear what we're available for, whether it's advice for an hour and a half chat with a policymaker in a ministry who wants to ask some questions, if it's to talk to the media. I think that's like one way in which that could be concretely organized in quite a quick way. And if we have this database, then it could expand, and there are some models like the Carbon Brief Global South Climate Database, where the objective is also to bring in people from all over the globe and direct policymakers and so on to the right people.
Yeah, thanks a lot. That binds it pretty much to this network idea of an expert or a participant list, probably, if we are not considering ourselves experts all the time.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Helena. I work at the European Policy Center in Brussels. I likewise sort of sit outside of the research communities to some extent, and it's been great to be able to tap into the conversations in the past 2 days. One challenge that I found in researching and writing about this topic, focused mainly on policies, is that there is a lack of monitoring and evaluation around this topic. And so when we ask the question of what kind of, for instance, interventions, what kind of support measures, et cetera, work, in what way do they work, and really trying to maybe also go beyond a binary understanding what works, what doesn't, but the nuances. This is something that I found really difficult to kind of make sense of. And so I guess twofold question for me would be if there is space to, in a maybe smaller scale way, try to connect with, for instance, development practitioners, humanitarian practitioners, and try to, once a stock-taking exercise is maybe taking place within the network, to try and establish a conversation there and exchange on this. I should also say that there's a lack of mapping. So, and a lot of the institutions that do their own monitoring and evaluation don't make it publicly accessible, which makes it very difficult to write about this and to develop recommendations, et cetera, et cetera. And a second point would then also be to maybe within the network, as I said, try and bring this together in some way that can then, for instance, be used by people like me who wouldn't necessarily be doing their own field work, but would very much rely on insights for my own kind of research.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I would say, yes, you are the network. If we consider this a relevant part and aspect of having these subgroups and subtopics and sub-themes, also linking to practitioners, obviously that is a relevant thing that can be done. If there's one person in the network doing that, good. If there's 10 people forming a group, a cluster doing that, perfect. That's my perspective, at least.
Hi, my name is Claire Steiner. I'm from Chulalongkorn University in Thailand. And again, thank you to all of the organizers. It's been a really pleasurable conference, and definitely just very appreciative of the opportunity to be able to come here. I think maybe also something that could be done is just more of a focus on like different regions and really like incorporating scholars from other regions. Like I've been attending climate change and human mobility conferences that are focused on Asia and the Pacific, right? And I think that the focus there tends to, I don't know, it's just like different topics, I guess, sometimes than like what we were talking about here too. And so I think it's like even more important when we think about like what mobilities look like, or there's also a strong like justice component I've seen to it, like the conferences I've been to, or human rights component to, or like talking about forced displacement, that I think maybe it's also a product of the sessions that I attended. But I just think maybe there could be a bit more of like a targeted outreach like to those like regional networks that are already also working on like the issue, to see like what they're focusing on like in that region.
So.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I think we have a couple of, there's Ingrid also. We have a number of good ideas and inputs to work on.
Yeah, just connected to your point, I just wondered then, is our approach then to become a global network, or are we rather connecting to other regional networks? So it's maybe a question I had.
There were some of the questions I wanted to go also through the questions of the online participants. Benjamin asked, like, how do you connect to other area-based and other interdisciplinary networks, for example, IGU, IASA, IMISCO, etc. More topic-based, but also the question for me, well, like, there's the ACME, the global, the GCCM initiative. These are questions that are also important. How do we relate? How do we cooperate? How do we probably avoid or not avoid duplications and competition? I think these are things that needs to be discussed and mapped out. I don't need a competitive environment with other networks existing. We discussed this yesterday briefly and found like, compared to lots of the other networks that are there, the outstanding feature of this group would be the breadth and width and depth of the topics, with a very fine-grained and nuanced understanding of different types of mobilities and dimensions and non-human aspects of mobilities. It will probably be not so easy to find connections in the PERN network, for example, which are more demographers working on different aspects of the whole thing. Then the different mobility initiatives now in Africa and the GCCM probably also focuses more on climate as a driver of mobilities. And I think we are in terms of thematic field, that's something, it's broader. And we are not a project initiative coming up with a climate mobility report in Africa or in Asia, but we are, I think, more a generalized cooperation network. So I wouldn't really find hard to find competitions, and there are so many open ends and good ways to connect and to get into exchange. And I think I think this is not so difficult. Yeah, there are some ideas about cooperating with different other areas on climate and policy interactions, going to the COP and taking this opportunity as a stepstone also to communicate issues. I think that's what we covered already. Lisa brought up the idea of the Frontiers Journal of Climate Mobility with special section. I know that creating an own journal is something that is a very ambitious thing. We asked, like, who does it? That would be the kill factor for who does run a journal. I don't know. Maybe in a few years we find like we need the own journal because we cannot stand supporting the big corporate publishers anymore. I don't know. Felicita brought up the network that she initiated in Berlin, the NUPS network. And I think from one of the meetings there last year, we had a strong focus on the idea how to communicate complexity. That's exactly one thing that you brought up also. Policymakers would need simple messages, and we would need to communicate complexity and try to bridge this somehow wiggly path. Yeah, Himani brought up like who has already experiences and connections to policymakers. That could be something that could be part of an expert database, like, right, who has connections or wants to share connections or wants to engage and help and facilitate communication with policymakers. Yeah, so I think there are a number of things that we collected here. I guess the next important step would then be, oh, sorry, you are raising your hand. I'm sorry, Colleen.
Yeah, oh, wow. I just have two small points. I just wanted to say that if there are any young scholars or PhD that want to connect and maybe, I don't know, start a network or something, or as part of this network, of course, but yeah, feel free to talk to me or email me or whatever. And there was a second point I was a bit interested in, I don't know if that's just me, but
I wanted to know how we can make research a bit more sustainable because we're talking about climate change. So that was another topic I'm a bit interested in. If anybody else is also interested in, then please connect to me. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So offers for getting in action now.
Yes, just maybe a small provocative thought. People in this room who came to this conference, many of them did not come for the network. They came because they were selected on the basis of a paper they had written. So how do you want to create a network with this basis, which is already extremely promising? But to a large extent, it's a basis of people who share a common interest, climate and migration, who might have different views, which is great, or homogeneous views, but with different approaches, methodologically, sometimes ideologically. But if we want to go beyond what I would call a random coordination group of people and turn the group into a network, this is the provocative thought. The network should not only be considered as a platform of exchange, because this is the definition of internet. The network should rely on people. So people should, and this is an open discussion, we don't need answers now, people should be in a position where they give something to the network. This is maybe a strong definition, slightly, it put also the burden of the network, of creating it, on people. It's not only a platform where you have services. For instance, some basic things like sharing research on a regular basis, letting know, making public the type of documents you're working on, things like sharing methodologies, but something that would be a bit mandatory so that you also feel that you're part of more than a random group of people who were lucky enough to be selected or brilliant enough to be selected to a conference.
Yeah,
could I just respond to that? Yeah, I also like, though I really also support this also policy exchange and practitioner exchange. I do connect with also your earlier point. Also think the content, is also important, on which we connect and get to know each other, and of course also disagree on points. And I think that's also what this is for, right? To further our research and maybe therefore also earlier the plea, if there are people connecting on particular themes, thematic themes, to also connect on that together and develop that together as substreams or something like that. I think I would at least much appreciate. Yeah.
Okay. So with regard to time, I think there was two comments already from Carolina again, who said like, well, highlight the networking with migration scholars. Just coming from the large IMISCO, the largest migration conference in Europe, where she would say, well, very few aspects on environmental mobility is presented. Could be an idea also to form a standing committee on environmental mobilities. That would be another idea to do something there. And Hacha Gurin suggested a more practical suggestion, listing tasks with responsibilities. That's something I thought about. We're a little bit not running too late in time. We are running a bit late in time, but I think that will be taking 5 minutes. The idea here would be, again, go on the Mentimeter page. This link works. You will see a small error messages. If you open that link, the host has switched slides. So you can click, go to the next slide, and then see the slide. What I would suggest here is something that Hacha has basically pointed to. Answer the following question. What are joint or network like activities that you will do or commit to do in the next 12 months? Joint or network means like something where you say, I want to share my activity. I want to get other people joining me in this activity. could be meeting with other PhD candidates focusing one specific method, could be whatever, or could be network activities like we want to join forces to build capacities to help in developing this expert database, whatever. And please plus your name or email address so people can see like, oh, someone said that or wrote that. I want to join in there. I think we can take some minutes just to, because that's exactly one idea to come up with actionable items. What I would do, oh no, wrong. What I would do, yeah, and please add your name or email, any contact point there. Can be very concrete stuff. What I think would be the next step from this, we collect all that, and I will try to summarize this a bit and put this either on a Padlet or in a form where we can cluster things, right? Yeah, just take some things. If you have, for example, I'm working on a project group on immobility, and I want others to join me. Or I want to start a special issue on XYZ, and I need people enforcing this group. Please add your name or email so we can, everyone can say, okay, this is the person I need to talk to. Huh. Great, these are very concrete things. Just take maybe some more minutes to add things here. I think that would be really good if we have a good number of things that we can in the end cluster. Yeah. So what we, no, you don't need to take picture of the screen. We will push this out to everyone. And I think with Annika, the idea would be to turn this or to transform this into a Padlet, like the format that you see and this plenary whiteboard and the other tab that we just had for collecting comments. It's just easier to write things from a mobile phone in Menti than writing on a Padlet. But I think it's easier in the end if you have your laptop screen or your computer screen to cluster and say also after the network meeting here, once you're home and maybe are remembering the good old days in Vienna when it was still warm, like, there's something I want to contribute. There's something I can add myself here. There's a new idea coming up in the train or in the plane when going back to your home places. I'm always slow in these things. My ideas come after the conference. So, but this will be all possible. So this will be nothing will be lost. Lots of things, absolutely great. I didn't even scroll to the end. Lots of things. Great. So, almost done, right? Still some more few things coming. Okay. Yeah, so I think we can, nothing anymore coming here. If you have more ideas, we will put this online. There will be ample opportunity to consolidate this and to broaden this. But I would like to thank you for this small little exercise, and I hope this can bring out some really actionable things that follow this network. What would be good if there would be, for example, creating the expert database or something like that on there also in the next weeks. I think from Vienna side, I think what we can do is we are having the website already prepared. It will be easy to host the mailing list, and then waiting for any other activities to come forward regarding the further development of the network, of activities, of small and bigger things. Good. Yeah, some more things. 51 from 70 responses. Good. Now, with regard to the time, what I want to do now is make a little shift and invite Sumyadeep Banerjee, the Senior Migration, Environment and Climate Change Specialist from IOM in Vienna, from the regional office, to give us a few remarks and observations on what we are doing here. Which one are you most comfortable? That's what? I think you put it quite close.
Thanks for inviting IOM to this network and to the conference. If you cannot hear me, so if somebody, I can see Rob already kind of waving to me. So please do that, that helps. I would like to thank the organizers for inviting IOM to this network event and also the conference. This was an opportunity to meet several old friends. And I think that was good because that provided me at least with a chance to, check up with them on how they were. I haven't seen many of them for quite some time, but also given that they have been working on this topic for a very long time, just to double check that if we are moving in the right directions in different parts of the world. IOM welcomes the establishment of this network. Me and a colleague of mine, we are here, and I think that this is kind of at least for the event, was a one-stop shop for us to learn about what you are doing, at least those of you who are here. I have a notebook full of notes, so I also especially appreciate that a lot of sessions in this conference was focused on the migration consequences in the context of climate change. We hear quite a lot about the drivers, so it was quite refreshing to hear so many experts also working on migration consequences. And of course, the important points that were raised today about the cross-cutting issues such as gender and climate justice. Before I go into a bit more in detail, I think the key takeaway message that I would like to provide is that for this network, which has brought together an incredible number of experts, you probably would like to explore the possibility of including those experts who are not in academia. If I can give you one example of one flagship initiative, the Foresight project in 2011, although it was helmed by academics, included a number of non-academic experts. And I do see some Foresight alumni in the room. So I thought I should just highlight that. Now, moving to the topic itself. The topic is now anchored into several global policy frameworks. UNFCCC, Sendai, GCM, several other things, including the recent stock taking on water, or the upcoming stock taking on food that is going to take place. There are relevant texts in these global frameworks that advocate for better evidence, both qualitative and quantitative. It has been quite interesting to hear in the last year and a half, that even within the IPCC and the UNFCCC processes, people talking about qualitative evidence. So not just statistical data, but also the importance of qualitative information. Apart from better evidence, there is need for mainstreaming, coherence, and capacity development. We also notice, based on the work we do, that much of that capacities are in global institutions or national institutions. There is a lack of capacities or initiatives at national level in many countries, but also at the subnational level. And this is specific to the the work on human mobility in the context of climate change. So in the first day of the conference, Etienne mentioned about the unequal geographies of research, and this is true. I mean, you probably find more empirical studies about the Pacific than you find about Europe or about some of the developed countries. I know the counter would be, but those countries are the most vulnerable, and I agree with it. But what you also do is, by generating or concentrating the research in certain regions, you probably unintentionally contribute to the narrative that this is also an issue of the global South. For IOM, I cover Europe and Central Asia. And in my early years with IOM, it was quite often that my interlocutors from the EU member states, but also non-EU member states in Europe, would highlight, but this is where we would like to talk about migrants from other places. And there is a need to have more research in places. I saw that map that you were putting together, and it would be good to have research in the areas that are still blank. Mainstreaming of this topic into planning, implementation, and monitoring remains limited, and this is important. I mean, of course, as individuals, you can decide on what you want to do with the research that you lead. If you're happy with just publication, that's, I think, a fair call. But you would also need to remember that a lot of that research is behind paywall. And it is quite common for not just civil society organization or community-based organizations, but even UN organizations not to have access to the evidence you generate. And I have heard different opinions about engaging with policymakers, but policymakers also come in different shapes and sizes. So not just the politicians, but there are also, as was pointed out, there are bureaucrats. There are scientific advisors to the bureaucrats and to the politicians. One of the things that I have never agreed with is I was always told that policymakers do not read, do not care about scientific evidence. They are busy people. Many of the politicians or senior level bureaucrats are busy, but many of them tend to have a scientific advisor, and the evidence goes to them and they check for it. And this is especially important for emerging topics where there is no consensus. So having that evidence with you really helps. One other important issue is, just like in the sessions we have discussed about what phrases to use, what terminologies to use, we also see this while engaging with the institutions. It's a fractured mandate. UNFCCC related processes, environment related processes come under one ministry. The work on disaster displacement and planned evacuation comes under a different one. And yet you also have the ministries and departments that deal with migration. You have ones that deal with national planning. It is important to also engage with these ministries across the board, because from the GCM, from the UNFCCC, from the Sendai, or any other global framework, the message is on having a coherent message on human mobility in the context of climate change. And you cannot have that if you one, if you do not, if you only interact with a specific ministry, or if you do not put in time. As many of you are here who have also worked in different parts of the world, including engaging with policymakers, it takes a lot of time to take to bring evidence or anything else into practice. I was asked a question in one of the informal discussions here: when should we include, non-academics or planners or government people in the research? My advice is you should do that as soon as possible. Increasingly, at least I can tell about IOM, we increasingly include government officials in discussions while discussing research design, while discussing the scope and content of our operations. There are a lot of technical people in the ministries, and I think you will you will find someone who will lend an ear to you. So now the question is, are you engaging with policy actors and practitioners enough? I would advocate for those of you who are here that you engage more and more, not only more, but also more regularly with actors associated with policy and practice. I can assure you that they will listen and act upon it. There are several people in this room who have been following this topic for more than a decade, and things have moved forward. And a lot of that has actually happened from, the policy or practice side of things. Here, and this is probably the last part of my remark, I would have to say something about IOM. For those of you who are not aware of the International Organization of Migration, we are the UN Migration Agency. Our work on the humanitarian aspect of environmental change goes back to the 1990s, and the work on the climate part of it is from somewhere in the mid-2000s. We have a division on migration, environment, climate change, and disaster risk reduction, which now houses all the climate experts and the DRR experts from within the organization. So we have seen that it is necessary for us to kind of synergize the work between the climate experts and the DRR experts. To give you an idea of the work we do, currently IOM has 164 active projects on migration, environment, and climate change across 80+ countries. And that adds up to about $0.7 billion in funding. Much of that is operations, but there is also work on consultations, evidence generation, capacity building. And we do require, we do take decisions on a regular basis, and we find evidence helpful while taking those decisions. And the programming covers different types of migration as well in context of environmental change. So we have teams that work on disaster displacement and planned evacuation, but also those who work on pastoralism, labor migration, and planned relocation. We also have colleagues who focus on policy-related work, and those whose day-to-day work would be on operations. So for example, all of you are aware of the earthquake in Turkey. Because of IOM's presence in Turkey, we were one of the biggest UN presence in the country during the earthquake. And a major activity that my colleagues would have to undertake in the days after the earthquake was to provide the Syrian migrants with temporary protection, access to service, food, shelter, etc. So there are a lot of entry points where your work, whether on research or different types of research, is quite useful to us. We also have a long-standing partnership with several member states. As researchers, you would have experienced that there are countries or places where it is not easy to undertake research for various reasons. In IOM, we actually do undertake research in many of those countries because of the mandate. We also do a lot of research on human mobility in the context of climate change beyond the usual regions where the research is concentrated, such as Pacific, East Africa, West Africa. You will see a lot of research commissioned by IOM in other regions. I would make one point about mainstreaming. Mainstreaming is important. We were discussing here that whether migration is an adaptation, can we talk about mainstreaming migration into adaptation? Operational pressures needed us to mainstream migration into climate change mitigation. So at present, we are looking at how to green operations in the humanitarian places, looking at impacts of air pollution on urban migrants, or looking at whether urban migrants have access to energy efficiency and renewable energy solutions. So there are still places to kind of bring this work forward. Last but not the least, we do not do this work in isolation, of course. We undertake all these projects in collaboration with colleagues from academia, government counterparts, civil society organizers, and increasingly private sector. And also, we do a lot of this work in collaboration with our sister UN entities. To summarize, we have complementary competencies. Working with policy actors and practitioners, I believe, would add value to your work. And similarly, it would add value to ours. Thanks.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, thank you very much, Zoom. I think that was reinforcing again the feeling I have at least taken up as a general meaning that that is an important area to work with or engage with policymakers or policy experts. I think that's what I take with you. Technical experts, not policymakers only. We often think of policymakers as those who make laws. This is super important, but I think technical experts within administration, that's a level that we might find much easier to talk to and to engage with. Good, thank you very much. Then I think you mentioned that already. Anything further to contribute here? But I think that deserves a huge, sorry. Thanks a lot. And this conference in Liège is legendary. I have to add here for everyone who doesn't know that. So, yes, so that's my last thing. Then I would.
Yeah, I think that's it basically. It's a bit sad actually that it ends already. It was very pleasant to meet all of you. And many people actually in the room also asked me, oh, this must have been a lot of work to do. It was a lot of work actually, but it was a lot of work that we did together in a big team. And we'd like to ask the team to come here in front because you deserve a bit attention at the end of this this conference. Just stand up and come across. Yeah. It was so pleasant to work together on this conference. There was so much energy, creativity, and everything went so smoothly. I think it was, we could have never imagined it to be better, actually. It was ideal for us. I hope you enjoyed, and with this, we all kind of send you farewell and hope it's the end, but it's also the beginning of a lot of activity and also the start of moving forward to Liège next year. So have a good travel back and see you soon.